This is the If More Let's Divide podcast.
Yo, Charlie, what's up? This is the If More Let's Divide podcast, and we are still releasing an episode every week on Thursdays. You guys have to share the podcast, and by doing so, you are enabling us to still do this, to still churn out dope episodes for you week after week. Charlie Fred, what happened?
What up,
Charlie?
What's good, man?
Yeah, I have not done so much prep before, but I had to do some reading
Of course.
for this episode.
Necessary.
And I realized that my brain now finds it hard or difficult to hold information.
Age.
Age?
Yeah, really
but,
grow, Charlie.
but yeah, Charlie, but I'm not that old.
Now I'm saying where they in that active state of consuming information and having to
Yeah.
remember it for a purpose.
Because back in the day in school, we the chew baba.
Yeah, cram 'em.
Yeah, Charlie, we
Then
just
chew them about
chew
it,
everything, then go sit down.
yeah.
You know, we don't understand, but we try to keep it in memory.
Yeah.
And the brain was very, very solid then.
Yeah.
So I don't know what's wrong with my brain.
There's nothing wrong. I think it's just a consequence of the age and then maybe the time that you allowed yourself to read
Yeah,
the
and
material.
maybe because I have little things going on at the same time.
Of course.
Yeah.
Obviously.
Yeah, but our guest is,
But you did fast.
yeah.
As you say, they fast.
Yeah,
How's
yeah.
that going?
Ochai, I've lost 6 kilograms in a little over a week.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so you just joined them for the fasting aspect of it,
for the
obviously.
fasting. Yeah. But
Very dope.
I couldn't do one day because I got a little ill.
Okay.
So I couldn't do one day, but I've been fasting through and through with them,
Okay.
Yeah, I mean,
How many hours is it?
from 6 to 6.
Okay, 12 hours.
Yeah, but the
Okay.
first 3 days I did from 6 to 10 p.m. From 6 to 10. It wasn't intentional. I was just doing so many things at a time. So I couldn't eat at 6 or I couldn't break my fast at 6. Fred, our guest today, we both met officially in December. And she was like, yo, your podcast. And we're like, yeah, you're always welcome.
Yes.
And
yes.
Today she is here with us.
Exciting times.
Do you want to?
Yeah, I mean, why not? So from my, I mean, I think when you meet people the first time, when you're younger and they tell you first impressions kind of matter.
Yeah.
I was one of those people that was dismissive of that thought process because I'm like, you can't know anybody in a short instance. But as I'm getting older and the memory is failing, you realize how important it is for the kind of impression the person leaves on you when you meet them for the first time. And that's to say that when we met her, she came off as a very genuine person, a lot of energy. I love the brightness of her spirit, the way that she just approached us and we spoke and we had a decent conversation. And I didn't walk away feeling like this is somebody that I will forget. So now going to read her work and what she's been doing.
Yeah, she's a writer.
Yep.
A playwright, a journalist, a CEO of a multinational, organization.
Yep.
She's doing so many things.
Very dope stuff.
Yeah, her latest book, Emotional Justice, a roadmap to racial healing.
Hey, Chiu and Baba said this.
A roadmap to racial healing is something that we actually, I personally want to get into with her, so I get the nitty gritties. So Charlie, without further ado, help us welcome Esther Armah.
Yeah.
Auntie Esther. Can I call you Auntie Esther?
I beg.
Oh, wait. It makes you feel old.
Just Esther is fine.
Esther.
Esther
You know,
is fine.
and people, when you don't add a title to it, they go like, you don't respect,
in our culture.
you're not, in our
That's
culture.
true.
So, I mean, Esther is cool by me.
Yes.
But
I appreciate the sentiment, but Esther is fine.
There is an A in there.
There
what,
is.
What was it for?
Akesi.
Akesi?
Yes. The
Akesi.
story of tribe.
Is it?
Yes. So my daddy is actually in Zuma. He's God rest his soul.
Oh, yeah.
But my mother is Ashanti.
Oh.
And so my name is really a combination of tribe and faith. Esther for Queen Esther in the Bible. And then Akesi, I'm Sunday born.
Akesi?
That's in Zima.
Oh, really?
It's in Zuma. My daddy's in Zuma. God rest his beautiful soul.
Yeah. Oh, dope. Akesi?
Yes.
Akesi.
We're kinfolk.
I like, are you in Zuma?
Yep.
Praise the Lord.
Hallelujah.
Hallelujah.
So Armah is in Zima?
Mm-hmm.
Really? Never knew.
Oh, you didn't know?
Yeah, I thought it was gone.
Well, my daddy is in Zuma, and he's a very proud Nzima man who also speaks Ga and Nzima.
Oh, okay.
So he would be very happy to both have it assumed to be Ga, but also know that he, as of every day of his life, he's an Nzima man.
Oh, wow. No.
Yeah.
May he rest in peace.
Yes, a very proud Nzima man.
Amma both Ga and Nzima then?
Yes.
Okay, cool. There was a story that my granddad has told me about a relationship between the Nzimas and the Gas that he passed at 96, but when he was getting into it, I couldn't finish the story.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, because he was trying to, because I'm Guy in Nzima as well.
Oh, okay.
And he was trying to tell me something about,
Maybe we're related.
yeah, something that I was supposed to know. And I mean, I think because of age, he just got tired. He's like, I'll tell you the story another time. God rest his soul. He left me, but yeah.
Isn't that so sad, though? Our elders have these amazing stories.
Yeah.
And they pass before we get a chance to hear them.
Yeah.
We're not doing a very good job of accessing the information while they're here too. So
I agree.
That's on us.
We need to do a better one.
I'm actually
sure.
trying. I'm
Yes,
actually
yes.
documenting, interviewing people, my aunties,
Oh, really?
and all that. Telling me stories about my childhood, my parents,
Even your tribe, stuff like that.
Yeah.
Folklore, so.
And I read somewhere that your father was a politician and an ambassador.
He was an activist, a politician in pre-independence and then post-independence Ghana with Kwame Nkrumah, very proud Nkrumahist. But also, my dad really was a man who advocated reconciliation. That's his lifelong focus, desire, engagement. I would say his first love was Mother Ghana, for sure. His first love was Mother Ghana, and the parallel to Mother Ghana was my actual mother, is my actual mother.
Oh, wow.
So we had those were the twin loves of his life, for sure, for sure. His
When you say
children, all 5 of us, came a very long way down the road.
Can you please expand on the reconciliation aspect a little bit?
We are a nation who've had a history of turmoil politically between civilian rule and military rule. And so our family got definitely caught up in the military coups. But, my dad was always a Ghana first kind of man. And so, yes, of course. I mean, he worked with Kwame Nkrumah, so he was a proud NPP man. But beyond party, there was nation. CPP, sorry. Beyond huge correction, thank you. Beyond
New Poison Party, sorry.
Beyond party, there was nation, and even beyond nation, there's continent.
Yeah.
So he's a Pan-Africanist, actually, first and foremost. And reconciliation in terms of Ghana and what we were navigating politically was a major focus for him. Is really his whole adult life.
When did he pass?
Wow, I don't even recall the date.
Has it been like very, very long?
It's been almost 10 years.
Oh, okay. So
and also, I feel his spirit.
Yeah.
Very much so.
Yeah, and I know that, and I believe you because of how you are speaking about him now. You talk like he's still here with us.
Yeah, I think with me, I feel that he's with me, and I always say I'm definitely the product of both parents. I have my dad's. My dad was a man who taught his daughters to keep company with our mind. He taught his daughters that your intellect is a precious gift, so nurture it and honor it. And I I think we are a society that sometimes disregards or disrespects the intellect of women. So to be the daughter of a man who really taught me that intellect is a gift and something to treasure and something to nurture, I carry that. It shaped me for sure.
So did you ever meet Kwame Nkrumah since your father was working closely with him?
Not to my memory, but there's a beautiful picture of my dad, my late father with the late Kwame Nkrumah, and my two senior sisters in these very pretty white dresses as little kids, and their big Afro puffs. And it's also a picture that I really treasure because I think it's the story of, it's a reminder that all politics is still about people. And that children are part and must be part of nation building. Yeah. And so you don't disregard young people from the work of nation building. And every time I see that picture, it reminds me of the notion that, we are a nation so sometimes poisoned by party politics that we can forget what was the fight, what was the advocacy for politics for. And ultimately it was to be a citizen within your nation, to contribute to your nation, to build towards your nation. So that picture always reminds me of that. I love it.
And I also read somewhere that during the 66 coup, your family was under house arrest for like 2 years straight. Is it true? Like 2 years?
Yeah. The night the tanks came, February 1966, there was my mother in the house. And so I think, February 1966 in our history is taught as a history lesson. It's a date and it's the end of Kwame Nkrumah and it's the end of that political time. But, for my family, because my mother was the one in the house the night the tanks came and the soldiers broke into our home. And then my family went into house arrest before then being kicked out of the country. Because of that process, I have a different relationship to the history of coups, and it's what gives me a specific focus on the importance of healing. Because I think that we treat the military coups and the intervention of military coups as not something that has really traumatized us as a nation and for which we actually need healing. I think that we don't. I think when Jerry Rawlings died, actually, the outpouring of the, particularly the children of families who had been personally impacted by the coup, the stories of their trauma, what I call the legacy of their untreated trauma, and the fact that it really hadn't been a national conversation. And I felt, and I wrote about it at the time in the Business and Financial Times, that this is an opportunity for us to engage in healing as a nation. And we are misguided if we think that we don't need it, because we've had a long period of political stability.
People don't know that, they need healing.
Right.
And yeah.
And I think because part of what happens is that the nature of healing, we have a kind of a westernized concept of what that is. So we limit it to the notion of therapy. But what I'm talking about is that we as a nation, a national healing. And when I say a national healing, I mean that we are still dealing with the legacy of the untreated trauma of colonialism. It still shapes our nation. So for example, we are an economy of entrepreneurs. The majority of our country is led and run by entrepreneurs. The majority of people are employed by entrepreneurs. And yet, we have an economy of multinationals. That is untreated trauma. And that is what a healing that relates to the economy looks like. But we think of the economy only as currency, fiscal, cedis, dollars, sterling. I'm talking about the emotional economy of our African identity. And the fact that we revere what is made outside and we despise what we make ourselves. We treat what is made outside as more valuable as what we create ourselves. That is part of what makes us need a healing. So we have dismissed it because we think it's this notion of you need to see a therapist and talk. I'm saying, yes, that's an element of it individually. But nationally, as a nation, if you go to a hotel, a 5-star hotel in Ghana, and I go to, I ask for, woo, I felt that. And I ask for mango juice, and the mango juice that I'm drinking is imported from outside the country. But we grow mangoes in this country. For me, that's why we need a healing, because nowhere should we as a nation, when we grow so much that is extraordinary and that is beautiful, where we have artisans and all of these things, and yet we have the unemployment that we have the despair that we have the rage that we have, that is what needs healing. And if we limit healing to the westernized notion of it, we don't pay attention to what does healing mean in Ghana, in Africa. And that's my work. My work is to help us see, well, what does it mean right here in Ghana? And it means very simple. If you grow tomatoes and you eat tomatoes from Italy, we are a nation that needs healing. Because you grow them. If you grow them, you should be able to sell them. If you're able to sell them, somebody should buy them. If somebody can buy them, then you can feed your family. If you can feed your family, then you can get an education. And then you can grow. And then you can prosper. And then you can become rich. Why aren't there tomato millionaires? Why aren't there cocoa millionaires? Because we think of farming as poverty. But if you actually go to England, the farmers are the aristocrats. The landowners, the farmers are the ones who are wealthy and considered wealthy. And so the notion of what healing means for us has to really be very, very local. I call it soil and stomach.
Soil and stomach.
Soil and stomach.
Wow. Wow. Charlie, yeah.
There's a few things I'm going to roll you back on. Because I think you're speaking on so many important ideas that we don't take our time to maybe address. When you speak of national identity, I guess your father was working with Kwame Nkrumah, who, for all intents and purposes, was a Ghana first ideologist. He wasn't trying to separate us into our different tribes. And my thought process tends to lean towards, because we were separated so much, we had our own existing disputes before colonialism and then the aftermath of it. Kwame Nkrumah's work was to try and bring us together. So you have an American identity. What is the Ghanaian identity? I think it was interrupted because he was overthrown. And since then, in my point of view, we have never actually existed as Ghanaians, because MPP is considered the party for the Akans. NDC embraces the Gas and the Ewes and some of the other tribes. So those who felt like they couldn't fit amongst the MPP will gravitate towards that. I want to know what your opinion is, because you have done the work in the field to see if there's any validity to that concept.
We were African before we were NPP, CPP, NDC. We always were. And so the notion that our identity is lost because of the death of one man, I think it's both sad, but I actually think it's untrue. Now, I think that the mission of that man is derailed, and then a country changes course. Absolutely. But do you cease being Ghanaian and therefore part of a greater continent? No. But who you are to yourself may change. But who you are to yourself needed healing pre and post Nkrumah. Because there is no African that has escaped the traumas of colonialism, enslavement, and apartheid. It has shaped our emotional identity, to our blackness, to our Africanness. It has shaped us. How could it not? How could it not? Years and years and years and years and years of your identity being rewritten, your history, your story, your ancestry, your religion, everything that is yours being rewritten as inferior, and then enshrined in every way all over the world. That shapes who you become. I don't mean you don't have personal pride as a Ghanaian. I mean the way we run our country is symptomatic of that trauma. So we are African, full stop. We were African before Nkrumah. Certainly Nkrumah ushered in a Pan-Africanism. But Pan-Africanism isn't dead. But all identity evolves according to the circumstances in which we live. The question is, what are we making sure that we can fight for beyond party politics? Because if you don't belong to a party, are we saying that you're not Ghanaian?
Yeah, I guess And that's to the question I'm asking is, I think what I wasn't even saying that the Nkrumah's death is the reason why we cease being quote unquote Ghanaian. I think that in the effort to establish what the idea of a Ghanaian should be, we didn't have enough time between the national agenda. So you can I mean, from what I've read about other great nations that have been able to bring people together from different walks of life. The classic example is obviously the American system. Is you have the Irish, you have the Italians, you have so many different people from Europe who come to America and they shed those identities and take on the national identity of being American, even though they still remain that you have Irish, whatever day, they celebrate that, the Italians, but ultimately, most Americans that I know are American before anything else. My worry is that we never had the opportunity to properly define Ghanaian enough that once the coup started, everybody was more focused on what can I grab for me and my ethnic group, because that thing was so deeply embedded in us that we just resorted right back to it. Like, you know what, I'm going to take as much as I can, sort my people out, make sure they're good. And then that doesn't foster the togetherness that we need to focus on. Because I love Ashanti culture. I'm not Ashanti. I love stories from all tribes. The Airways have amazing stories. But because I feel very Ghanaian, and I don't know if that's a pervasive emotion or concept, because people may feel more Ashanti than they feel Ghanaian. Some people feel more Ghana than they feel Ghanaian. Some people feel more Ewe. And I feel like I see that in our society more. That's what I'm trying to get your perspective on. Right.
So I think first of all, I think the Americans are much more divided than you're saying, actually. Much more divided. And many it's such a contested relationship with with being in America right across the board. But I take your point about some people will relate more powerfully to tribe than they do to nation. But I think all identity is evolution. It's always evolving. And so we are a young nation in terms of independence and post-independence. And as a nation, the notion of our identity is still very entangled with that of our colonizers, even though, because we think of colonialism as black and white. So unless there's white people physically around you, we think, oh, that's colonial, that's Chile, that's an American thing where they're dealing with white and black. But for us, it is about how we run our nations and how little we connect the progress of our nation to the progress of our own selves. And I don't know that the fact that you identify as Ashanti more than Ghanaian, I think there's an individual relationship that you have with your nation. And then there's what is the national relationship? What is your professional relationship? And how is that being fostered? Do you know what I mean? And so you have the same crazy politicized divisions in America that are happening right now between the Republican and the Democrats. The levels of white supremacy and racism and how that is shredding all of these rights and all these things going on in the States. And the division is crazy. I think for us on the continent, I think Pan-Africanism has felt like an ideology and a dream. But I think it's actually fundamental to our survival as a continent. It's just fundamental to our survival. COVID should teach us that. The isolating of losing access to all of these different things. And we're a young country as well. We're both a young country with a young population. So in all of our histories, the history of movements is that it's been young people that have been game changers every single time. What does that look like for this generation? That's my question. What does it look like?
Yeah, wow.
So, I mean, I guess just before Mutombo comes in, I understand the notion with the current deep-rooted divisions amongst Americans, but I would dare say that those are along ideological lines. is Republican versus Democrat, because Democrat is liberal, progressive in ideology, more so than Republicans are conservative, fiscally responsible, quote unquote, but it's not along the lines of I'm Italian and you're Irish. It's more, I believe that the country should be run this particular way, progressive, yada yada. It's an ideological division between the old traditional ways of the Conservative Party and the Progressive Party that is liberal, do as you wish, let everybody get free this, free that. Whatever your philosophy is, I think America is divided along ideological lines. In Ghana, I guess what I'm speaking more to is every leader that comes in, it feels like his tribe is ruling and they're going to take as much as they can for themselves.
Right.
It's not about any type of ideology. They don't have any ideological positions where, if you ask me, and I read voraciously enough, so I think it's fair to say this, I don't know what the NPP stands for.
Right.
I don't know what the NDC stands for. I don't know if they're liberal or they're conservative.
Right.
All I know is when their party's in power, their cronies are going to get rich and the other party is going to get poor.
Right.
It may be the same in America, but I don't know their ideologies to say, this is the vision we see for Ghana. We want Ghana to be driven by entrepreneurial spirit. The young people will get education, blah, 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 we're going to do this. And I know specifically what they're fighting for.
Right.
So same thing for NDC. I just think they're all wishy-washy. They say what must go on. And truly, their ideas are about, we are Ashanti, we are Northerners, we are Achim, we are this, we are that. And that is driving how they govern and how they rule and how they... So I don't know. That's what I'm kind of worried about for identity's sake.
And I totally agree with you on that one. When it comes to Ghana, I think I totally agree with you. I think the nature of partisan politics is a disaster for the future of the nation. And if it continues in the way that it is, we are in trouble as a nation. No question about that. The question is what is our role to play to transform that? Because politics is not outside of us. We are part of it. And what I totally disagree with is America is not ideological, it's deeply racist, it's white supremacist, irrespective of party at this stage. In terms of what's happening in that country, it's deeply racist, it's white supremacist, and irrespective of Democrat or Republican, that's the nature of what is happening. And the assault on rights is not just ideological, it is rooted in the racist history of the founding of the United States of America. So I disagree with you on that one. But I totally agree with you when it comes to Ghana and our political leaders. It's actually why I thought Nana Bediako, the young guy Cheddar, when he came along, it was a breath of fresh air because that's
Fred's guy.
What up, Cheddar Charlie? Campaign money for flu.
Because I feel it got people engaged and excited in politics in a way that they're just not. We've turned politics into a game for older men that doesn't engage and shouldn't have, young people go and sit down. This has got nothing to do with you. Yeah. And yet it's not just dangerous, it's cancerous to our future. So there I agree with you, but I also think politics is a local issue and everything is local. And the challenge is we think of it as purely central and purely governmental. Like I think just me personally, when I think about learning about who my own representative is and where I live, and the idea, I used to teach journalism in Ghana and I used to teach in Adabraka. And I remember my students had a bit of a negative impression of the traders who would literally trade right just outside where they were. And I said, you have no idea, these are the entrepreneurs of your community. The reason you're able to do A, B, C, D is because they're all running businesses. And so I had them do an assignment where they had to go and interview all these different people. They had phenomenal histories. They knew the area inside out, back to front. Their political knowledge of the history of Adabraka was extraordinary. And I said to the students, we are a nation that is over-certified but under-skilled. So you're fighting to get the certification. But their skills means they have actually more knowledge than you do.
Yes.
But you've been trained to think that because they're not certified like you, they don't have to listen. You don't have to listen to anything that they say. So
going back to what you said, some examples you gave, like if we are importing and using tomatoes from somewhere else, we need healing, and all that. I kind of agree with you, but I also know that it doesn't just apply to foodstuff.
Absolutely.
It also applies to all sort of things like bleaching and all that, right? Because there are black beautiful men and women who want to look white. And also your father worked with Kwame Nkrumah. Kwame Nkrumah got with a light-skinned woman. Does he need healing?
That's an interesting way to put it. I think no matter your position in the world, nobody is immune from the devastation of white supremacy and how we see the world. Nobody is immune. And so part of the challenge that we have is we think position or title or power or wealth makes you disregard or believe that you don't need the healing that somebody of a different economic status has. And the truth is, nobody is immune from the impact of white supremacy on our identity as African people. Nobody is. So we all need a healing. The question is, what is the specific emotional work that I have to do, that you, Matumbo, have to do, that you have to do, and how does that relate to how I move through the world, how I learn, how I work? Do you see what I mean? And so part of what we have to understand is that you can be ideologically, politically, philosophically, extraordinary, progressive, and future thinking, but your emotional relationship to your identity is the thing that shows up and shapes how you move through the world, and that needs work. And so we, as an African people, definitely have that. And by that I mean the notion that you're profoundly powerful as a people just leads you to internally honor what you create. And so the healing goes inside out. So it's not even about not engaging or welcoming others. It's privileging others over your own needs. And that privileging has a detrimental impact on your own nation. And yet we still do it.
I'm sure Kwame Nkrumah had his own reasons for getting with Fatia. I have no say to that. But personally, as the first black, president of Ghana, I feel that it would have been dope to get with a black woman, a black beautiful woman. Now, if you go back and check, skin bleaching became very, very popular. The importation of bleaching creams got so popular after independence.
After independence?
Yes.
I think I would dispute that. But the reason I would dispute that, there's a phenomenal scholar called Dr. Yaba Blay, who's been a guest on your show, actually.
So I was going to talk about...
She's a colleague and a sister friend of mine, a phenomenal sister. And the thing that she really helps us all understand, it's the institutional nature of white supremacy as a global business that we have to look at. And so colorism has always been a part of the notion that you yourself in your African skin is not enough. It's one of the ways that you're not enough, but it's 100% there. But it's the same thing. Your medicine is not enough. Your education is not enough. Your religion is not enough. Your African print is not enough. It's the nature of entrenching in your mind, body, and spirit that you are inferior to whiteness. And that once you believe that, everything you will consume will be outside of yourself. And that's what we see. So I think colorism is one of the elements of how untreated trauma shows up. And the nature of white supremacy is that it's a global multi-trillion-dollar business. And so it's always been about how do we profit from each other's trauma. And if we can profit from trauma, imagine how we might be able to profit from healing.
So I'm working on a documentary with Dr. Yaba Blay now, currently, and it's on colorism, like skin bleaching and all sort of things. And I realized that skin bleaching became popular after independence. So I'm like, I haven't read anything. I haven't done any proper research.
I didn't know that.
But I thought, put one and two together. I'm like, maybe it's because Kwame Nkrumah got with a
It definitely had an impact.
Yeah.
I definitely, given the power of what happened, and the status, I think it's one, but I think it's one of multiple factors.
Yeah, fair.
Because we had always been taught and told long before Kwame Nkrumah that the nature of your ascension, if you were lighter skinned, you would just go further, no matter what. Pre-independence, it was the same. Yeah. And so, I think it's a powerful tagline. I don't know what research backs it up.
Okay. Yeah, true. So before we go on, like we actually did our own intro, and I know that you are doing so many dope things. You have done so many dope things. So if you could back that intro up for us.
Back it up.
What do you do? Yes. Shout out to Juvenile. Back the thing up. Yeah. So what do you do?
What do I do? So I'm a CEO.
Brap.
I'm a former journalist. I'm not a journalist anymore. I'm a former journalist. I write plays. I'm a playwright. And I created a racial healing roadmap called Emotional Justice. Then we created an institution so that we could develop it and create projects and trainings and thought leadership and go to different parts of the world and use the racial healing roadmap to transform organizational culture and make healing a living reality in different organizations and different spaces. And so we do that. We do it here in Ghana. We do it in Cape Town, in South Africa, in the US, and in the UK.
Wow. That's
amazing.
Yeah.
And that's what your book was on?
Yep. This
Emotional
Justice.
A roadmap.
A roadmap for racial healing. This is really the thought leadership. So this is the text that breaks down the entire roadmap, what it is, how it was built. It took me almost 15 years, 5 different cities, 3 different countries, 3 different continents, research, assignment, community engagement to develop it. Because I had to go back and look at the racial healing models that the world reveres, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, those big racial healing models, and then look at the history of what they were created, how were they created, what are they based on, also what are the flaws in them, and do those models serve us now? And what I really learned when I was in South Africa in particular, but also I did 3 assignments. I did Ghana, Philadelphia, South Africa, actually London as well. And I really learned how much the Truth and Reconciliation Commission in South Africa centered whiteness. It was very much about the emotional labor of Black South Africans, and the beneficiaries of that emotional labor were white South Africans. It was about soothing white economic anxiety, white identity, fear of repercussion, and whether or not people told the entire truth of the horrors that they perpetrated, there was amnesty. And there were really important people that we don't know enough about in history. In Chiki Biko, for example, the widow of Steve Biko, who sued the government and said, no, we will not forgive. There needs to be a justice process, even though this is a very emotional reality. And that's what led me to think, the emotionality of what we've been through needs justice too. Yeah. And if we don't engage it as a justice project, we are in danger of creating emotional apartheid. And that's really what happened.
Wow.
So I have some controversial, I think, my own estimation is that they're controversial views on the search for our freedom, our healing, Black people as a collective. As I get more mature mentally, I start to think of why we seem to be locked in a particular position and gaining no traction. And I want to ask you a question based on these feelings.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that in the fight for independence from colonial rule, did we as a people underestimate the gravity of governing, running a country, and the competency required to govern a country, to run a country, whether it's economics, education, social, all of the things that takes to make a country? Were we truly prepared from a competency standpoint and even from a mental standpoint to say that we have taken stock of where we are coming from and where we want to go, and we have a plan, and this is how we're going to execute?
I think that would have been an impossible thing to have, and you would never achieve freedom and governance that way. I think you fight for freedom from the perspective of being enslaved. And then every step of what you achieve, you have to build, it will be broken, it will be changed, and you will have to continue to grow. I think that two things happen. I think that the notion of competence and incompetence is always a relevant question about leadership. It always matters that we ask it. And this is where, for me, racial healing matters, because the legacy of colonialism taught an entire nation of people to be employees, to move from one space to another, but not to necessarily lead. But you had a history pre-colonialism of leadership that's in your national and your continent's DNA. It's part of how you've run. You're born of a continent where people ran kingdoms. So it's not as if leadership isn't something that you is something foreign to you, but the impact and the influence of colonialism transformed what leadership looked like. So you're having to navigate the change and deal with the legacy of how colonialism shaped us, and the notion of what leadership became, that it became far too narrow and far too individualized and then far too party political. And that notion has created an absolute horror story for us that we're trying to navigate. And so I think that we have leaders who are cowards, we have leaders who are self-serving, we have leaders who are uninterested in anything other than their own personal gain. We've made it too challenging for people who are interested in politics to actually get into politics if the political route is the way that they want to move. But nations have never changed by politics alone. Even independence was not achieved by politics alone. It's always been a marriage. It's the political reality and then the pressure from the people. And so when we think about competence, it also has to be about us as a people. What kind of pressure do we sustain and maintain in terms of the political space, so that there is an understanding that you rule because you've been elected, and that vote has always been on condition that you're actually serving we the people. And I think it's switched around. I think people feel like that they serve politicians, and that we have this either an aspiration or this molested relationship with the big man, the Oga reality. So the aspiration is to be an Oga, because that's how you gain wealth. And so that's for me, what I see as one of the big challenges we have.
I agree with all of that, what you just said.
No, it's not me. Fred is.
So,
sorry.
That's okay. I agree with all of that. I'm also trying to dig a little deeper. So the concept of, say, a council of elders, right? Pre-existing, pre-colonialism, we in our different groups had ways that we governed.
Absolutely.
And one of the things that I have been very intrigued by is to go and look at each individual tribe and how they had traditions that were entrenched in, like, if you study it, you understand it was entrenched in competency, in skill, and there's a way that it must be done.
Right.
I guess I'm asking that in search of independence, when we were looking for this independence, was there ever a thought process to say, you know what, we have been influxed with all of this Western stuff and how they want to do things. We have taken some information from them which may be useful, but we had a way of living that if we're going to form a nation,
right,
how do we collectively bring the best out of all of us?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe the Ashantis had this practice, it was great. Maybe the Nzimas has a different practice, that was great too. The Gans had their ways. The Ewe said, did we have the patience, the desire, the love of self enough to sit and really say, you know what, it's not just because I want independence to say I'm independent, but the independence I'm fighting for is about self-identity. What you're talking about is,
right.
I don't want no white man ruling over me and telling me I'm substandard and I'm not good enough. So what is it that I'm trying to show the world that is making me inherently equal?
Right.
I don't care what they say about me. I have something to show. I have practices that I've let go of that I want to bring back in a modern way. Did we really set out to be free? Or we set out to just have the title, the tag, and then go on about business just like the way they were doing in the West? Did we have a plan?
We set out to be free, but freedom is not an act that you acquire. It's not a thing that you grab. So now you're free, now what? The status of being free, becoming free, is the fight for independence, the fight against exactly what you said, the colonial oppression and the colonizer's way. So there's the fight to gain freedom from a version of yourself that you don't recognize. And then you get it. Then it's a different fight. Then it's the fight for what does it mean for me to be free and what does it mean for us to self-govern? And then you're going to run into all the ways that colonialism has shaped you that you did not necessarily think about or take stock of. And that is going to be one of the major challenges that we have as a nation. Into that space comes the danger of tribalism, the danger of discarding the notion of expertise was based on expertise. It didn't matter what tribe you were. Were you brilliant or were you not? That was the singular question. And so, yes, part of the individualism, the tribalism, all of those things are part of the poisonous legacies of colonialism, but also because if we don't do the work to engage an emotional identity that is about the future of a nation, there's no way to step out of that reality. And that work is not one person's individual thing to do, that it's us as a people. Nobody is immune from doing that work. And I think part of the challenge that we have is we always think, okay, if that person over there does the work, we'll all be fine. If Mutumbe did the work, we'd all be fine. If you did the work, we'd all be fine. And it's never been the case. There's nobody who is immune from doing it. But to your point, I love Ayi Kweyama, one of my favorite writers. And one of the things he talks about, we are a people of the way. And part of the way was Fundis. Expertise was expertise. Expertise, full stop. Either you had it or you didn't. No. But that's not how, almost nothing in our country runs solely on expertise. That's not just true of the continent. That's true globally, where lineage, power, wealth, and the means by which you acquire that gets you into places where you have no expertise and you have no business doing. It's not unique to the continent, but we definitely have a place and a space that is messed up to the point where if we as a people don't engage it, we are doomed to keep repeating the same thing. But I don't think it's a negation of the fight for freedom. It's like you become free. Now you have your freedom. Who will you become?
And I think that's the biggest question.
So I'm more drawn to healing. Yeah, and before this section, you spoke about the National Reconciliation Commission.
Truth and Reconciliation Commission.
Truth. But Ghana had the National Reconciliation Commission in the early 2000s. it was on TV.
Right.
Yeah, when Kufuor came into power, he actually, introduced, it so that people could be healed. I don't know if you've done some work, some research around, that. And if you have, I want to know if it was effective, because I remember watching it on TV every day for several weeks,
Right.
and people will come on there and they would even fight, they would even argue, they would do all sort of things. We had a guest here, and Fred made it know. JJ Rawlings, our ex-president, was on there, and Fred said he never ever said sorry for all the harm that he did during his time. So if you've done some research on the National Reconciliation Commission or committee that took place in Ghana in the early 2000s, I want to ask you, was it effective?
So it's one of the areas that I'm going to be looking at, specifically for what does it mean for us to have a healing. And I think part of the challenge has always been is that we wanted to limit healing to this very narrow idea, in this very narrow sense. So one person does or does not say sorry. We have a certain amount of weeks and a certain amount of time. It's televised in a certain type of way. And then this is supposed to be, it starts here and it ends here. Yeah. And it's just not the reality of how people move through the world. Well, so when I was looking at the South Africa example, I was saying apartheid was 48 years, but the healing process was 9. So if maths matters, data matters, then your healing cannot be shorter than the length of time that the harm was perpetrated. Then you don't just have the harm, you have the legacy of the harm. You don't just have what happened, it's how what happened then impacted you, shaped your future, your family, your sectors, your businesses, your organization, your education, your health, your medicine, all of those ways that you were shaped. And so healing should, for me, it's not a question of an NRC, a beginning and an end. It should be a national part of our economy. That's the way I see it. That you've got to resource healing, recognizing that there are entire bodies of work that need to be done. And how do you know that the healing has happened? Because our economy starts to change. And I mean the economy across sectors. So what does that look like? In the most crude sense, we were talking about tomatoes, but there's other ways to think about that. So the challenge with making it like an NRC is that you can politicize a healing process, but you don't make it about the people. You make it about the politics. So then one politician has done the healing process. So what the next government, if the government isn't NPP, so what is the NDC going to do? Yeah. And so the idea that healing is party political as opposed to national and continent-wide is really a problem for me. And so that's what I think was really the issue with it. Not that it was a bad idea, but that we have to take healing seriously according to our experience, not according to what somebody tells us. So I think the NRC was actually probably based on what the TRC did, that the idea you have televised hearings. Of course, there's going to be fights, there's going to be arguments, because healing is going to be a process, just like grief is. And if grief as a process has 5 stages of 5 emotions, anger, denial, bargaining, acceptance, rage, that's a whole set of emotions to go through a whole set of experiences. And then you have the reality of some of these experiences have never been discussed. So just discussing them is a triggering and is a traumatizing. And so the idea that we are going to bookend our healing is a problem. And that can't work. We need it to be entrenched within our economy. In the same way we have a national constitution, for me anyway, as a continent, we need a national, continent-wide focus on healing.
Wow.
100%.
So 100%. Before Fred comes in, I mean, how did you get to this point? Like healing, but it's not direct healing, right. Because when I talk about healing, it's either physical or emotional. Right. But yours is totally, even though it still has these, yours is very, very, very broad. How did you get to this point?
So just to be clear, mine is it's individual action connected to institutional behaviors.
Yeah.
So it's still individual work. You have individual work to do, but you've got to connect it to institutional things. So when I think of, you talked about therapy earlier. So when people do therapy, they don't necessarily connect it to the institutional organizations they're working with. Emotional justice is saying your individual emotional work must connect to institutional sectors in order for it to be impactful, that it's a game-changing reality. And it came to me through personal trauma, family trauma, and then connecting that to the profession that I was part of. Like, I'm a family that's personally touched by both the beauty and the power and the headiness of freedom, and the violation and the pain and the trauma from military coups. The idea, my father was incarcerated, and being in London at the time, so nobody necessarily knows that he's a political prisoner, that he's in prison for a set of beliefs. Your father's in jail. There's a lot of people whose fathers are in jail. And so there is I know for me, the pain and the trauma of what that meant and what I took on was a lot, and it affected how I saw myself, and it definitely made me feel less than, for sure. In addition to being a living African woman who lives with a legacy of colonialism and who is taught that your Africanness makes you inferior. There's the family stuff and the national stuff and the global stuff. So what I started to do was to connect the personal and the familial, and then connect it to journalism and look at stories. So even the story of the military coup, I remember speaking to, learning about it from what my mother went through, and then going to ask Gamal in Nkrumah about what his family went through, and then going to London to ask Paul Boateng what his family went through, and then learning how all these stories were similar. But they were so untold. We had not connected them in terms of our nation's history. And so for me, when we think about healing and blackness, it's always the personal, the political, and the progressive, and the people. It's all connected.
Wow.
It's all connected.
Deep.
Yeah.
Deep. So moving on, before we come 100% to the book, I was talking about a post earlier on.
I'm not on social media right now. That's maybe why I didn't see the post.
But I'll read everything to you. Maybe you'll know why Armah tagged you. Do you know Global Fusionist?
Yes. Aretha Sappho, my dear sister friend.
Yeah, that's my homie. So on my Instagram, like, I posted a picture and I shared a little bit about me. Then Armah came to tag you and said something. So I want to ask you, why do you think she tagged you on this post? So I'm going to read.
Okay.
My sons and daughters will never know this. I suffered in the hands of my mom and my grandmother. My mother liked me, and then she didn't like me. It revolved. She had her moments as a bitter single mother. She had disappointed her mother, my grandmother, whom she lived with. I was beaten frequently and mercilessly as a child. Every wrong thing I did was rewarded with beatings. I don't mean lashes where you have to stretch your palms or pout your ass for a few lashes. No. I have had temporary tribal marks on my cheeks and other parts caused by the pain and the belt. Yes, this belt belonged to a man, a neighbor, Uncle Kwakwamnebo. He came in when my mom and my grandmother could no longer handle me. I was getting taller and stronger. I could unleash myself from their grip and hide every item that could be used to beat me, apart from Uncle Kwamnebo's belt. Not only did I get beat up, they would sometimes grind pepper, ginger, cloves, and more pepper, lay me down, and with the help of an enema pump, squeeze everything into my system through the anus. You don't know pain. You have never experienced pain. My sons and daughters will never experience this because no human should go through this. But now I do understand my mother and my grandmother. I am a better version of my unknown father. Why do you think, Armah, tagged you on this post?
I need to take a breath before I speak.
Yeah.
Oof. Wow. I think she tagged me because we do specific work around healing and black men. And we did a project in Ghana called Witness. And Witness was a project with 50 men in Ghana. And we were asking them a very specific question. What violence did you witness as a child, and what violence did you experience? And how did that violence shape how you saw yourself? How did that violence shape how you saw women? And how did that violence shape what it meant for you to be a man? And the idea of that project was simply saying that for us, when we think about healing, we have to go to the source and to beginning spaces. And the work for men is to begin by sharing their experience and their stories of what it means to be shaped by violence. Because we are a society that really normalizes violence towards women and trivializes it and minimizes it. And we did a lot of work. I did a lot of work on that in my earlier years here in Ghana. But the thing that would come up again and again that I would see is the degree to which it was normalized by men and how little work was being done with men. Yeah. And so we made a decision to switch and start to do work with men. So I'm sure that's why she tagged me. And so we would have said to you, Mutumbo, would you like to become part of the Witness Project?
Oh, okay.
And actually, we did men in Accra and men in Tadi. And then we were asking all of them the same question. And it was a real powerful testimony. A powerful young Ghanaian journalist would take all their stories, record them, they were transcribed, we put them together, and it's part of the healing harm, healing history. And that we have normalized violence, and that normalization leads us to perpetrate it. And how do we stop that pattern? And the first part of it is the willingness to speak. Everybody is not willing to speak. So there are those who are willing to speak. Others will lean on your words because they can't find their own, or they're not yet ready to speak their own. So what you said is really very moving and very powerful, and I'm sure that's why. She knew about the Witness Project. I'm sure that's why.
Okay. So what would you tell, or would you say to someone like me based on what you just heard?
I don't know there are words to define the pain and the horror of what you experienced and the terror. I think you were emotionally terrorized.
Yeah.
Not just terrified, but you were emotionally terrorized.
Yeah.
And the physical violence had an emotional component of what it means to how you see yourself as a man. And because we think of masculinity in a particular way, you're a tall guy and you're regal in your bearing. So we don't necessarily think about the trauma behind the physicality and what it means and how it shapes you, how it moves you. And so we created a project called Brotherhoods of Becoming. And Brotherhoods of Becoming was literally about saying, what does it mean to create a masculinity of safety, empathy, and accountability? And that safety, what does safety mean to me if I've had a long relationship with unsafety in the hands of those who were supposed to take care of me? How does that shape how I see the world? How do I then define accountability when nobody was accountable for the pain that was caused to me and how it shaped me? And then the Brotherhoods of Becoming is about saying, as men, certainly in Ghana, we've created brotherhoods of bystanders, where men watch other men perpetrate violence and either simply stand, or they stand silent, or they do nothing, or worse, they join in. What does it mean to create a masculinity that does not stand silently by when that kind of violence is being perpetrated. So that's what I would say. And then before all that, I would say my heart breaks for you in a million pieces, and my soul aches for what you must have been through.
So Yaba Blay once again. She's now in Ghana. Yaba Blay is a homie, you know. I've known her for so many years.
Yeah.
And we were having a conversation around this. Yaba Blay is always saying that I'm too strong. I should express love, you know. And it's true. I don't express love. You would never ever get me. It's one thing that all my girlfriends that I've had in my life, it's one issue that they had. You would never ever catch me, you know, hugging, kissing, or expressing love. I'd rather show you by doing something, but not to hold your hand or give you a, you know, pet name. So Yaba Blay was breaking things down for me, and she's been encouraging me to express love. But do I have to express love? Do I have to? This is me, right? I feel that as far as I'm not maiming anyone, I'm not hurting anyone, I am fine. But I do agree that, like you said, I've gone through things, right? I've gone through things. And I wouldn't necessarily say my mom was wicked or my grandmother was wicked. As I came up, as I grew up, I now understand them, right? I now understand them because I look at my kids and I go like, how would their mother feel if I wasn't here? You know, I think that was what my mom was going through. For a single mother who had 3 kids, doing everything herself, I think, you know, as a human being, you would get fed up and, you know, do anything that would maybe make you feel okay. But I still think that, yeah, I need to go through, I need more work. I need to do more work on myself. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, because I mean, unless you've ever sat with her and asked her what she went through, the truth is you don't know what your mother went through, but you do know what you went through.
Yeah.
And what you went through had repercussions and had consequences. And so I think it's, in the end, it's about, you're saying you're fine. And the point about healing, it's not that you're not fine, it's that what would it mean and how would it shape you and how would it change you if you moved through your own healing? What would change? And so I could say to you, I'm fine before I went through a whole journey of understanding and engaging emotional justice and thinking about healing and my family's trauma, my trauma, and how that shaped how I was. And I know that I'm better. When I say better, I'm safer emotionally. I'm more honest. I'm more open as a result of the journey of healing. And I think that that's what healing does. Is it there are scores that we feel we need to settle, and those scores are not necessarily physical. They're emotional scores, because the things that you went through all came with a cost, and the cost of that you may not have counted yet. What is the emotional inventory that you might need to do as a result of what you've been through? Only you can decide that. But I'd love for you to join our Brotherhoods of Becoming project.
I was going to say maybe we'll talk after. Then we will.
Let's talk.
Fred.
We're doing our Healing Harm, Healing History is a multi-year initiative looking at healing in Ghana. And on one of the years, we're doing one called Fragments, which is specifically about Black masculinity. So I'd love to talk to you about that.
I like the name. Fred.
It's a very interesting subject for me also personally, and I think that was a very powerful thing that you wrote there, Mutombo. I don't know how I missed it. I don't know how I didn't see it. I know a bit of your history and how things you've expressed about your experience with your mom, and I always want to try and put perspective on experiences like that, because even though I don't have any particular path of expertise in any of these fields. I also, like you say, what role do we choose to play in shaping minds, changing ideas, in how we exist? And the role that I've chosen to take on is somewhat of interpreting who we are and why we are the way that we are. So for me, I think it's important to give this other perspective to your experience. There's no absolute truth because, like she said, you never had a chance to speak to your mom. So you can't know her point of view, like from her own mouth. But I'm always very careful because I look back at my relationship with elder people, my mom, my dad, and as I'm getting more mature in my mind, I realize the tools that we have now were almost alien to them in the era in which they lived, where socially, culturally, traditionally, their methods of exhibiting, whether it was love, anger, emotion, was normalized in a way that is extremely violent in retrospect. But as you're saying, Bentois, for those who don't know what Bentois is, it's the, what do you call it? What did you call it? Enema. I never remember that name. But it was a normal practice as I was growing up for them to mix all kinds of concoctions and stick it up children's, buttholes and push it up and say they are disciplining the child. But then you also look through that same relationship, and one of the expressions of love is on your wrist now and around your neck is a good year, which traditionally our folks consider wealth. It is wealth, passing on gold to the next generation, an inheritance. They took that seriously. That spectrum of emotion, I try to figure out that, is it a consequence of, because I think this is what I'm trying to say. It's never okay to be violent. And it's never okay to hit a child or maltreat a child. So that's not what I'm saying. But I think once you understand the reasoning and the emotion behind the hitting, when my dad hit me and said, I don't care what, never in your life are you allowed to touch a woman, because I got into a fight with my sister at a party and I whooped her ass. Sorry, Yvonne, I love you. But we got into a fight and I beat her up. And when I came home, my dad tore me up. And the lesson there for him was, you never touch a woman. I think that has its own level of craziness in it. But I think it was coming from the school of thought of that era, where it was gentlemen. Yeah, it's okay to be violent towards other men if you have to, but you don't touch a woman. That's where you could say my dad has made his progression in his emotional intelligence too. But now, I don't see any type of violence as okay, whether it's towards a man or towards a woman. So again, I guess the point I'm trying to make is the tools that they had is entirely different from the tools that we have. And then the perspective on those tools can allow us to maybe resolve some of the emotional hurdles we have in figuring out, did my mother love me, or was she just angry with my dad for disappearing? Because I don't think it's all of that was, oh, Mutombo, I'm beating you just because your father left. I think there were elements of that were social, they were cultural, they were traditional. This is how you discipline your child if you want your child to turn out great. And maybe they might have been doing it in ignorance, thinking they were shaping you towards the future they saw for you. And so I'm just saying all of that to say that the perspective to be deep in thought about the whys and the hows of why things were happening is an important part of the healing process, so that you can stabilize yourself emotionally. But I think you turned out great because you're a wonderful father and a wonderful husband.
I'm sure Esther has a whole lot to say. I mean, right after you speak, we would dive straight into your book.
Yes.
With what Fred said, do you have anything?
I don't think children don't have perspective. Children have experiences. And then those experiences show up and shape the adults that you become. And I think that part of healing is about making peace within yourself that you are not responsible for the violence perpetrated against you by whoever perpetrated that violence. And the fact that you still love them does not make you any more or less responsible. But I think that kind of violence and the legacy it leaves on you as a human is what requires healing. Because it's not necessarily, the thing about perspective is that you can be rational about it. And emotions are not about rationality. They're about what is left within you as a result of the violence that's been perpetrated on you. It's not just when that person beat you on your body, it's once the beating stopped, there's a whole nother set of things happened inside of your spirit. And so the healing is about what happens after that. Who do you become? And also who do you not become as a result of what you've experienced? Yeah. And certainly with our Brotherhoods of Becoming and with Witness, the revelation was listening to Ghanaian men say, I've never told this story. I've never told this story. I've never told this story. And the story may have happened 15, 20, 25 years ago, and they remember it in the teeniest amount of detail, which we were saying to them, what we're trying to engage is how much this has shaped who you became as a grown man. And also the idea that men have to shape and teach other men. And so not just to the children that they may bear in terms of the partners that they have, but that you're part of a nation and you're part of a community. And what does it mean to engage with other men in terms of who you are as an emotional human being? And so I know, February 1966 was one night of violence and soldiers breaking the glass and just screaming and guns and tanks everywhere. And I had nightmares and night terrors for 15 years.
Oh, so you were there?
I have no memory of being there. I have no memory of anything.
Baby, you were a baby.
I have no memory of any of it. But I had night terrors for years and years and years until my mother told me the story that she was the one that was in the house and my sisters were in the house. And so that's what made me say my body held a memory and it continued all this time. Wow. And so I think the point is that we can have an inheritance of trauma and that shapes who we become. None of us are immune. And so your healing is both your individual healing of what you went through, as well as how you now contribute using this platform, this podcast, this microphone, and talk to other men as well.
Cool. Fred, you want to set a tone for the book?
So I kind of read the synopsis of the book. I think it spans a very wide range of emotions and ideas around healing, from racial to, I guess, other experiences that make it necessary for us to take the time to try and learn ways. Because people take for granted that healing is something that we can just naturally do. But from the book, what I gather is actually a methodology to it, where you have to sit and take in what is a path of someone who has taken the time to study it and to share what she knows to be a working way to try and be better people, heal ourselves, and recognize that we do need even the healing that we never thought that we did.
So Esther, if you could tell us a little bit about the book, then we go in.
Yeah. Emotional Justice is a visionary roadmap for racial healing. And it is about identifying, naming a legacy of untreated trauma from the historical systems of colonialism, enslavement, apartheid, that shaped all of us as global Black people, brown people, indigenous people, white people, and how that legacy shows up and shapes how we see ourselves and how we see each other. And so emotional justice was first about naming the emotional as having a role in sustaining these terrible oppressive systems. So we know legislation played a role. We know people legislated inferiority, that there was policy, that you saw oppression in medicine, in labor, in the environment, in education, in all of these spaces. And what I'm explaining is that it was in the emotional as well. But because we don't think of the emotional as a structure, we don't think it has any role to play when we think about how do we deal with the legacy of enslavement, of colonialism, of apartheid. So we think pass a law to create justice, but we don't think the legislation matters, but our emotionality is part of how it shows up through us. And that systems, we think of systems as, let me get in my car, drive to this place called the system, I'll work there and I'll leave. But what I talk about in emotional justice is systems manifest through people. They work through people. They are sustained and entrenched and therefore dismantled by people. So in order to change how these oppressive systems have shaped us, what is the emotional work that we need to do? And so I identify what I call the language of whiteness. The language of whiteness is a narrative that all of us have been taught. Everybody, African, black, African, African-American, black in the Caribbean, black in Britain, black in Europe, brown people, Asian American people, everybody's been taught the same thing, that whiteness built the world. Whiteness saves the world. Whiteness leads the world. And whiteness is the best in the world. And that we as global black people, brown people, everybody else who's not white, we are the savages who need civilizing and teaching and fixing in order to exist in the world. Now, even though that narrative is BS, and we know it is intellectually legislated, we know it has shaped how we see ourselves. It's shaped the notions of thinking of Africa as inferior. And again, when I speak about Africa being inferior, I connect it to how we run our economy as examples of what we need to heal for us as a people. And so emotional justice was about saying, just as there have been roadmaps and frameworks and policies to change everything else, the emotional needs its own framework. It needs its own roadmap. We have to create it, we have to name it, we have to build it, and then we have to construct an institution where it can be worked in and actually dealt with. And so that's really the work that the book does. And then it breaks down the entire roadmap. It explains how I built it, the journeys, the research, the assignments, the community engagement in different parts of the world, and then the specific language in different ways. So one of the examples, for example, is we have to unlearn the idea of women are emotional currency. So by emotional currency, I mean that the only value a woman has is the service to everybody outside of herself. But if she wants to do service to herself, then she's named as selfish and thoughtless, and she's not a good woman, and she's a bad woman. And what does that mean in the world? How does that help shape us? You talked earlier about we came from a society and a history where expertise was expertise. Expertise wasn't gendered, but now we've gendered excellence. We've also gendered competence. So the minute a woman wants to lead anything, we ask, but is she a competent woman? Is she excellent? To be competent is the bare minimum. If you're going to lead something, you better be competent. But are you excellent? What is the thing that you bring to that particular space that makes your leadership valuable? And so emotional currency is just one example. So what does healing look like? It means unlearning that women are currency that appreciate or depreciate like the city. So if a woman is being in service to society, to men, to the world, to the church, to whatever, then they have value. So if we were saying we would like there to be 50 or 60% of women in parliament, because that would help create a better political system, then there's a huge explosion of why this is a problem. Why? Because in our party politics, women serve the leaders who are predominantly men. But when they are in service to themselves, it becomes a problem. We treat women like emotional currency on the continent, and then black women in general. And so part of what we're unlearning is that. Why? Because we have a history that teaches us that actually we've always needed a balance of qualities for us to have effective leadership. It's never just been one quality. If you look at the Ashanti, to become a king, a woman needs to name you a king. Why? Because the universe is telling you you need both to run any space. And so why is it we understand that historically, but now we want to fight about the value of women to society? It doesn't make any sense. That's just one example. And so women then also internalize that message. And they internalize that because they then believe their only value is how they are in service. I want to be very clear. I don't mean in service in a way that is powerful and brilliant, because all of us should be in service to the world. I'm not talking about that. That is powerful. I'm talking about a world where your only value is if you're in service to something outside of yourself. But the idea of women being in service of uplifting and engaging women, it immediately is seen as problematic, particularly in Ghana, in ways that are not just problematic, they are detrimental to transforming the leadership of a nation. It's just detrimental. It doesn't make any sense. And yet we do it. So that's another example. And that's what the book does. It lays out the 4 elements of the language of whiteness, it names them all, breaks them down, and then names the 4 emotional justice love languages that we should replace them with that can help transform our world. And then this book is the foundation that we run the institute with, the Armah Institute of Emotional Justice, and all the work we do. Talking to you about the masculinity work, we talk about black men in this book as well. And the projects that we create are designed to then make these words stand up on their feet. So when we do the Witness Project, asking Ghanaian men about the impact of violence on them, it's the manifestation of emotional justice for Ghanaian men here in Ghana. That's the work.
Wow. Dope. How Charlie Depot. Very, very deep. So did it take how long did it take for you to put this together?
Long time.
15 years.
Yeah.
Well, 15 years to build the 15 years to create the roadmap. I think it took 10 to get the book published.
Wow.
Nobody wanted to publish the book.
Wow.
Nobody did.
Was there a reason why?
Yeah, they would say no one's talking about this. I used to live in New York. So when I was living in New York, I was the host of a radio show. And I think I started writing it then. That's definitely 10 years ago. And they would say, no one's writing about this. No one's thinking about this. And you're not writing about this anywhere, so we can go and, check you out and see what you're saying. So just trying to get people to be interested was really challenging and really hard. And then I was figuring out how to write it and how to break it down in a way that is really straightforward and easy to read. And so the blessing is always hearing readers say to me all the time, what I like about it, it's actually very easy to understand. It's very, very easy to understand. And so, but it was definitely a hard book to publish. Very hard.
You mentioned the 4 phrases or 4 words.
So there's 4 phrases in the language of whiteness to unlearn, and then there's 4 to learn.
You mind sharing them?
Yeah, so emotional currency is 1. That's 1 to unlearn. Unlearning that women are currency that appreciates or depreciates according to their value to society, even if that value is harmful to themselves and harmful to their future. Another one is emotional patriarchy. Emotional patriarchy is a society that moves according to the feelings of centrally white men, but all men, no matter the cost or the consequences or the harm to that nation. That is specifically about understanding that all of us have feelings, but you're not supposed to run a country based on those. And yet it happens all the time. And then we talk about emotionality, and then we gender it as if it belongs to women. And yet you have entire nations running on the feelings of men. That's what's happening. That's what happened in America when Trump became president. You're literally talking about that's what happens. So there's emotional currency, emotional patriarchy, racialized emotionality. Racialized emotionality is when you take universal emotions, anger, vulnerability, pain, and then you racialize them. So in other words, you put that emotion inside the body of somebody who's black, and then you dehumanize them, and then you target them for violence. That's what we see in the police brutality.
Yeah.
That it's not that your vulnerability, how tall are you? 6'4"?
6'4", yeah.
6'4".
Wow.
So you're 6'4". So imagine you've dealt with a lot of trauma in your life. So what if you're having something to do with your mental health and you were on the streets in America? So you're feeling very, very vulnerable.
Yeah.
But your vulnerability, because it's in your body as a black man, is not seen as being worthy of empathy. Let's see what this brother needs. Maybe he needs some help. He needs some support. He needs to be taken somewhere. No, you're treated as a threat. And it's very likely that you could die. And we've seen it happen.
Yeah.
That's what I mean by it's racialized emotionality. Instead of the emotions being universally human, you racialize them and then you dehumanize the people who are racialized. That's what happens. And it allows people to justify the violation of both men and women.
Dope. Most of our listeners and viewers are based in the States.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Where can they get this in the States?
Get it anywhere. You can get it on Amazon, Barnes & Noble. Amazon is the one that a lot of people buy. But go to your independent bookstores. Yeah. It's all across the States. Barnes & Noble.
Barnes & Noble.
Yeah.
My favorite bookshop is Barnes & Noble.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I love a bookstore.
Charlie, emotional justice, a roadmap for racial healing.
Yes,
Charlie,
yes.
This is dope. I was going to ask one question. I'm sure Fred too has a question. Mine isn't even a question. So basically, everybody needs one of this.
Everybody does.
Right? Yeah.
Everybody does.
It makes sense.
It makes sense.
Yeah.
It's only right.
Yeah.
Do yourself do a good thing for yourself, and if you're not for you, gift it to someone else.
Gift to someone else, Charlie.
You've written this book. I want to know if America was central in your motivation to write it, but also how do you feel African Americans are thinking along the lines of what you've written in this book? Because you did mention that at the time of writing, people were not very, nobody's talking about this is groundbreaking, yada, yada. But the sentiment in the book, are you receiving the kind of, response and collaboration that it requires to say, this is profoundly powerful. We need to sit with it and examine what this country needs to do to get past this racial divide.
Blackness was central to me writing it. And when I say blackness, I self-identify as a global black chick. I'm black, full stop. I'm black, period, as they'd say in the States. I was born in London, so I'm shaped by Britain, for sure. My father is in Zuma, my dad is Ashanti. I'm shaped by Ghana. I lived and worked in New York for almost 10 years. I'm shaped by that experiences. All of those experiences shaped me. So I worked in South Africa, worked in Washington, worked in different places. So my lens is global blackness. So blackness is the founding guide to doing this work in all the different places that I have been. In America, specifically, I've always believed there are two specific wounds. The two false narratives, the false narrative of black inferiority and the false narrative of white superiority. And they both create traumas. It is it's lethal to be taught and then treated as if you are superior when that is a lie. It is lethal to be taught and then to be treated as if you're inferior when that is a lie. And the legacy of those two lies is part of what we're, living with for sure. I think when I write about this in the book, and I'm writing a second book about it, the idea of black men being haunted and hunted, not just in America, but I looked at London as well, I looked at South Africa as well, and how that shapes how you move through the world, how you move through space. A lot of our work for the institution is done in the States because there is a real desire, specifically by black people, to engage in healing. Part of the reason why is that the world has been moved forward when it comes to justice through movements very often led by black people. political movement, civil rights movement, labor rights movement, gender rights movement, name them. And that's been part of what's moved us forward. But there is a toll to the trauma that comes from what you did. We call it emotional policing, where the minute you view that police officer, you start to emotionally police yourself, navigate, change, transform, because you're thinking about the very real possibility that you might die. So the emotional policing is a huge part of how we are shaped as a result of the traumas within America. A lot of our work, the Armah Institute of Emotional Justice, does work in educational spaces. I'm going to the States next week to do some training in the universities. Universities use our training. We do training within philanthropic organizations, so social justice organizations use our training. Our training has gone to the United Nations. We've gone to South Africa to do this. So we're now doing it all over the world, whereas when I first started, it was a very, very limited space. So there is both a desire in terms of black folk to do the work. There's a desire for some white folks and white progressives to be seen to doing the work, which is not the same thing as doing the work. Mm-hmm. And then there is a massive portion of the population that is committed to maintaining the delusion of white superiority, because that is literally their only relationship to power is to center whiteness. And my work is to really engage the world to unlearn that, so we can have actually a humanity-centered healing. Not some weird colorblind kumbaya thing, but the reality of what it is to have your full humanity acknowledged. So that means if I see you as a black man in a rage, I don't think that anybody's life is in danger or you're a threat, because you are exhibiting the emotion of anger. And so what does it mean to humanize blackness, not just to white people, but to ourselves and to each other? How would it change how we love, how we lead, how we work? So all of that is wrapped up in the work that I do. And definitely I see a massive shift in how we engage. Like I said, I'm leaving for the States next week to do some training at a university and then to do a keynote at another space. And we've been doing this work. Now we have a team. Our team is in Ghana, in Chicago, and in the UK. We've developed these training programs that we deliver, and people hire us to deliver them. So we've seen a massive shift, not just in emotional justice. There's been a massive shift in the desire for racial healing globally, but I definitely honor emotional justice as playing a major part in that, for sure.
And with that, Charlie, it's been dope. Am I asked, where can people get one like this book to buy here in Ghana?
Vidya Bookstore. Go to Vidya Bookstore in Accra.
Yeah.
They've got them on sale right there.
Yeah, Vidya Bookstore. You can get this a dope book by Esther Armah, who is here with us on the podcast today.
Yeah. Thank you, guys. One last thing.
Then short it for me, short, because
very short question.
Yeah.
Simple hypothesis. Mm-hmm. Africa has very little leverage in the world.
Has very little
leverage
in the world.
Well, as it sits right now, from the way things are, China or Asia, manufacturing production hub, the West needs that. The West is the West. I think we don't have any, except for the raw materials and stuff that we provide, which is unprocessed. We don't have a seat at a table of power where decisions are being made. And I think is part of the reason why they find it so easy to mistreat us and devalue our lives. That's just my personal hypothesis.
I hear you. I'm going to say one very quick thing to that. Africa doesn't have a seat at the table of power. Africa is the power. We are a landscape of materials. The raw materials that are on this continent contribute to every major thing that the world makes.
Yes.
That is why Africa needs emotional justice and Africa needs a healing. Because when you understand, not that you have a seat at the table of power, but that you are the power, then you move accordingly. If
Absolutely.
we would move accordingly, it would be a transformed continent.
Awesome. That makes it great. I mean, that's the answer. I couldn't have asked for a better, perception on it than that. So, Tombo.
Dope, Charlie. Esther, we thank you for. It feels some way calling you Esther.
No, that's what I like.
Yeah. Esther, we thank you for coming to the F More Let's Divide podcast.
Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah. This conversation is so necessary, and to be honest with you, I've learned so many things, especially with healing. So many things, and I'm sure that I will touch base with you in the future to,
for sure,
and I also want to be a part of.
Oh, we should do the signing on camera before we go.
Yes, please.
Is it fragments? Fragments, yeah.
Yeah. Brotherhoods are becoming.
Yeah.
And it's specifically in Ghana.
Yeah, dope. So
yeah,
I'll have to be a part of that.
Yes.
And Charlie, yeah.
I'm gonna announce.
Oh, you brought us.
Yeah,
I brought us coffee.
Charlie, thank you.
So do you do Kenneth? How do you do it? Frederick. Oh, why do I keep calling you Kenneth?
It's okay. I
so
look like a Kenneth.
Frederick, what do you prefer?
Frederick. Frederick.
Esther, we thank you for coming through the podcast, the F More Let's Divide podcast.
Yeah, I already know.
Now, and I've been seeing you around for years.
Yeah.
But we never got to talk. We never got to.
Which is so weird, right? We never did.
Yeah.
Swagger salute.
Yeah. Swagger salutes, guys. Swagger salutes.
Swagger salute. That's what I always say.
I'm with it.
Charlie, Fred, the F More Let's Divide podcast.
Yes, sir.
We are through.
Awesome.
Wow.
Yeah.
This was great.
Yeah.
You guys do a great show, man.